I met Heather McAllister when she was performing burlesque and I was performing comedy at the Newark Airport Ramada Inn. It was a queer conference, of course, and I had just dropped all my handouts for it was 2005, we still used handouts, for the Subverting the Rigid Gender Binary workshop. I just strewn them all over the lobby, and I was very busy shooing away people who were trying to assist. I did not need help picking up a bunch of pieces of paper. And then, like something out of a 90s rom-com, this beautiful, tall woman appeared in front of me wearing black tights and an orange-flowered skirt. And she said, "Hey, let people help you. People like to help." I am from a stoic, Germanic, rural Midwestern farm family. Any complaint to my father was met with, "Most people are just about as happy as they make up their minds they're gonna be." This was a quote he alternately attributed to Dale Carnegie, Winston Churchill, and in at least one instance, Abraham Lincoln. If you so much as said, "ouch," in response to some painful stimuli, that could merit a 3-hour lecture on the perils of the emotional outburst. So this was excellent training for learning how to be a tough guy. I really appreciate it in that way, but it was very poor training for learning how to accept help. So there I was on a random Saturday afternoon/evening with this random but beautiful woman trying to subvert my entire worldview. But then she said, all soft and sweet in my ear, "Accepting help is hot." "5 hours and much sexy time later, Heather kicked me out of her hotel room because she said she needed her beauty sleep. I thought I had such great game. I was like, "Well, I was just wondering if burlesque queens wake up with glittery lips." She said, "Maybe if you stick around, if you're lucky and you stick around, you'll find out." So the next morning, Heather returned to her home on the West Coast, and I returned to Philadelphia. And we did stick around as much as you can when you live 3,000 miles apart, and we built a relationship with visits and phone calls and so much AOL Instant Messenger, and no real particular sense of urgency. Now, our first full weekend together, Heather had told me that she had a history of cancer, but the way she talked about it, it seemed like, just that, ancient history. 4 months into our relationship, the ovarian cancer that had been in remission returned. And she got sick, bit by bit, and then all at once. And we were still having late-night phone conversations, but now it was about chemo and side effects, and what makes life worth living and worth fighting for. And Heather had great support where she was, but it became clear, if we were gonna live together, it should be sooner, because there might not be a later. I was working as a nurse at the time, and so I gave notice at my job and packed up for a move to the West Coast. This was not a hard decision. If somebody you love is dying and they have logistical needs that can be met by somebody with your skill set and heart set and mindset, what other choice is there? How many people in their whole life to get to be the exact right person at the exact right moment? Living out that decision, that was difficult, but the decision itself was a simple hell yeah. Heather and I moved in together into a converted Hare Krishna temple. Partly converted Hare Krishna temple. The Hare Krishnas had left. That we found on the Portland, Oregon apartments for rent Craigslist. We called it the Castle because it was huge and also extremely drafty. And every available surface, inside and out, was either painted bright purple or gold. And we built a life there. And Heather spoke at an LGBT cancer conference, and it was Oregon, we did a lot of hay bale mazes. And we hosted absurdly themed potlucks. And we even saved our pennies for a trip to the healing waters of Lourdes, France. We were not sure how ironic we were being. But we were both lapsed Catholics, and we figured, it's good to cover all the bases. We made out in the grotto where Mary first appeared to St. Bernadette. By the end of that year, the cancer which for a little bit, the chemo stopped working, and the cancer which for a little bit had been in the background, it became the focus again. And Heather, she was so sick, and she couldn't eat, and we spent so many nights up all night in pain crises that even our attentive and skillful hospice nurses couldn't resolve. One day in early January, I was at the grocery store, and I called Heather and asked if I could bring her anything. She said, yeah, how about a 1/4 pound of the will to live? I took a deep breath, and I said, oh, honey, I'm at Trader Joe's, and you know how they are. They only had organic, and now they're all out. She was like, damn, I had a coupon. 3 weeks later, I was soundly asleep. And Heather woke me up, shaking me. You have to accept help. You have to accept help. I was sleepy and confused. Did she mean like the next day when we had people over for dinner, I was supposed to like let them do the dishes or something? But then I noticed she was fully dressed. She had on a skirt and a hat and her signature red feather boa. And she was like, this is an important conversation. When I'm dead, you have to accept help. And then to punctuate this point, she just kept poking me. You have to accept help. You have to accept help. You have promised you'll accept help. And I squirmed away because of the poking. But she was relentless, and finally I agreed. When someone you love is dying, you say yes a lot. Assisted suicide is legal in Oregon, and Heather had already made plans to talk with Barbara Glidemore, the official liaison to the process. And we all huddled around a conference table in a room, secluded room in the hospital where Heather got care, and Barbara Glidemore explained, now this isn't a process for everyone. This is a process for a patient for whom maintaining control is paramount. Now, Heather had mentioned before I moved out, she had mentioned assisted suicide to me. She wanted to know if it got bad like that I wouldn't oppose her. But it had seemed theoretical then. With this information, I mean, Heather was a boss, and she was the boss. I called her my queen, and that was lovingly, not facetiously. Heather, of all people, was a patient for whom maintaining control was paramount. Things just got really real. So the process for assisted suicide, of course, it's America. You have to do a bunch of paperwork. And then you have to make 2 written requests and 1 oral request. And then you have to find a doctor who will write a prescription for the lethal medication. And then you have to find a pharmacist who will fill that prescription. And then once you've done all that, you just kind of activate the sequence when you're ready. It actually is pretty complicated. A lot of people who begin the process don't complete it. And even many people who complete the process never actually use the medication. But Heather had other plans. One night in early February, I was sleeping curled up against her, and I heard her talking on the phone. Okay, you gotta come, it's tomorrow. I'm doing it tomorrow. I waited till she was finished with the phone conversation. I said, you know, when a person decides they're going to use assisted suicide to end their life, they're supposed to tell the person in bed with them before they tell the rest of the world. She said, oh, damn, I forgot that was the procedure. And then we just shared a long kiss and didn't talk about it anymore. Because when you're enjoying a kiss, you don't stop to think about the fact that the person you love most in the world is going to be gone from you forever soon. You just enjoy the hot kiss. It was overly ambitious to think it was going to be the next day, whether you're renewing your driver's license at the DMV or filing an application to end your life. Bureaucracy can only be rushed so much. But she was ready, and the waiting was hard. By 7:30 a.m. the next Tuesday, everything was in place, and Heather wanted to die surrounded by love, and so 3/4 of queer Portland was at our house. Let's see, there was one of Heather's friends had flown from San Francisco for the occasion, and another friend showed up precisely at 8:02 a.m. wearing thigh-high leather boots for the occasion. Heather's exes were there. All of Heather's exes were there. As well as her biological sisters. And for some reason, her inexplicable reason, her massage therapist, Portland, her massage therapist, who I called Woo Woo Carla, she really liked to talk about organic kale. And she insisted that our cat was doing energy work for us. The radical fairies came in and out, bringing with them the smell of patchouli and body odor, and giving all of us as many hugs and as much Reiki as we wanted. Also present was Portland's own liaison to the assisted suicide process, Barbara Glidemore. And she sat on our purple leopard print couch in her Ann Taylor suit and full face makeup, looking to her great credit as if this was all very customary, and this was the third partly converted Hare Krishna temple full of queer freaks she had been to just that morning. We all alternately held it together and lost it. The pothead smoked a lot of pot. I drank my own weight in Diet Mountain Dew. And when the time came closer, Heather pulled each of us behind a curtain around her bed for a private goodbye and some snuggling, and also, because it was Heather, to give us some advice about how we should run our life. For me, she said, of course, that I should learn how to accept help, and then she also told me that I should start trying on my clothes before I buy them. Something about them fitting better that way. At Heather's request, I drew up the IV anti-nausea medication that she would need to keep down the lethal dose of oral medication. As I was doing that, I started to sing the Snoopy song. We associated it with happier times, but my voice was shaking. She said, you know you're doing that for you, right? You know I'm okay? Heather's friend Keena had bravely offered to mix up the lethal combination. Now, the instructions they give you with the lethal medication from the experts on assisted suicide say it's supposed to be mixed up in water or applesauce for best absorption. Heather had other plans. The last taste in my mouth is not going to be applesauce. And so Keena mixed it up in Heather's chosen medium, Cozy Shack chocolate pudding. As I handed the spoon to Keena, I was like, oh my God, this has to work or she is definitely gonna kill us. So Keena and I went behind the curtain, Keena handed the bowl of pudding and medication to Heather. She ate it, and she died. It was terrible. And even though every moment of her death had been planned, I was still surprised. I was surprised by how gone she felt and how alone I felt. I sat beside her and cried a little bit by myself. And then I heard, out beyond the curtain, I heard our friends talking and crying. And I thought about what I had promised Heather. And I thought about how she lived her life. And so I took my pillow, my Snoopy pillow, and slid it underneath her head. And I kissed her softly on the cheek. And I said, "Let people help you, Kelli. People like to help." And I walked out beyond the curtain into a big, huge queer hug, into the arms of people who loved me and, yeah, very much wanted to help. Thank you.
Kelli Dunham.